Okay, welcome back to ABB TV. Today we're lucky enough to have my friend Ian Treleaven here, who, as well as having a lifetime of sailing, has spent 15 years cruising around the Mediterranean and the Caribbean and wrote both these books, Letters from the Med and the Caribbean, which if you haven't read yet, I would highly suggest getting them on iBooks. Now, Ian, thanks so much for coming and joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, it's brilliant, mate. Now, 15 years in some of the world's most awesome cruising destinations. There's so much that we can get into, and, in time we'll cover more of these. But starting off, one of the things we both know causes a lot of stress and anxiety, and possibly a few divorces and boat sales, is med mooring, and ending up either with lazy lines or anchored, but one way or another, mooring in the med can create a lot of anxiety. What I'm looking to do today is give you a chance to share some of your wisdom and gold. So let's start off with some of your observations. So what, in terms of when people come in to med moor, as we say, so anchored and stern lines, what are some of the biggest hurdles and hiccups that they make when they come in?
Well, the biggest obstacle is people don't prepare well enough when they're getting there. Now, we went through this ourselves when we first started in 2003. Mm-hmm. I've never med moored in my life.
Yeah.
And you come into bays and you say, wow, this is a new technique. And after a few mistakes, you work it out. And now, after 15 years, I think I've mastered it.
Awesome. And I mean, there's going to be one side is the equipment and one is then, the physical getting in. Let's start off with the equipment. I'm sure you've got a few bits on your boat. So you mentioned, for example, you've got a floating line. What sort of length lines do you have? How do you like to set them up for your stern lines?
Yeah. Well, there are various ways of doing it, and people who see this will say, oh, I don't do it that way. I've got my own opinion. But I've just found our way is a foolproof way of being able to get in and get out when you need to. There are ways of doing it. You can buy these reels now with webbing on them as stern lines and ropes on reels, but I just have a basic simple way. I have two 50-metre lines. One's about a 22mm floating line, which I picked up about 5 years ago in Malta, and because I found my previous line didn't float and often would foul around a rock when you're taking it ashore.
Okay. So
I use that one as my primary one, and then I have another one which is about a 10mm line. Not floating, but it's just my balancing line when I put two lines ashore. Again, they're both 50 metres.
And you mentioned earlier about having them in a bag?
Yeah. I put them in a bag. I learnt, it's interesting, people come on board and when they're pulling up the lines, they coil them up beautifully. Every time they coil them up, they tangle. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure you've all done that with lines. So I've learnt to put them into what I call a sugar sack. It's one of those candy stripe cheap bags you buy and they wear out at the end of the season. But I just fold the line into it or pay the line into it as I'm pulling the line in. And then I put those down the lazarette. I have a bit of rope on them so I don't have to climb into the bag, into the locker. Okay. I can just pull them up and I've got them there ready to stay in the bag as I pull them out.
Awesome. And also, do you prefer to have the line running, from the boat to the mooring point and back again, or just single line? And where do you tie it to?
I have done that. I always felt I was better off doing that because I was in control of my own destiny and I never had to go back ashore to let them go.
Yeah.
But it does take a lot of line to do that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, 50 metres. You don't always have 50 metres out, but often you have to use the 50 metres
by the time you've tied it.
One of the things I'm going to say, when I get the rope ready, I actually put it through the fair lead I'm going to use. So when I'm coming into it, I use the heavier one obviously on the windward side. And I have that on the windward side ready, and I just have it leading past the cleat, not necessarily through it, and dangling at the back of the boat. So when I'm in the tender, I can just grab that without yelling and screaming and saying, where's the rope?
We'll talk about getting out in a minute. Let's build this into then, so we've made up a little pretend harbour. It's pretty similar to a lot of places we get to in the Med that end up with a cross breeze, boat's already there, not a huge amount of space. Hopefully some flat water and some amazing tavernas. So let's have a look now in terms of getting in. So the preparation you do before you find yourself sort of all the way in here, and where you'd put the chain, how far out, etc.
Okay, well, I come in and have a look at the bay that I'm going into and work out it's suitable, and then I might pop back out again and just get the boat prepared.
So you kind of come back over here or something
yeah.
to do all your mooring lines.
And it's not only getting the anchor prepared to go, ready to go, it's getting your stern lines ready to go, as I was talking about before.
Yep.
It's having your fenders out, because more often than not you're in a tight situation.
Yep.
Now I see boats coming into bays, drop their anchor, and then they say, oh, where's the stern line?
Right, so they sort of get here and then they haven't actually got set
they
up
haven't got
yet.
the stern lines, and
That probably won't go too well
lots
for
of yelling
them.
happens,
Yep.
and or they don't have the right length of line, they're not prepared for what they're doing. So the preparation, because the thing you're trying to do, there's normally just the two of you on board, and you don't need to be yelling at your wife. It's not a good move.
Not a good idea. No.
So it's a matter of getting everything set up. Before I was going, one of the things I didn't talk about before, if it's your own boat, we learned from experience we had to get a bigger anchor than specified,
Yep.
and if possible a bigger chain than comes, and definitely more chain.
Yeah.
So most of these boats come with about 35mm chain, and they come with about a 45-pounder. So
Yep.
we have a 60-pounder, and I have 12mm chain, and I have 75 meters of chain.
Right, okay.
And then I have a rode on the end of that of about 40 meters.
Yep.
The trouble with charter boats, they're normally under anchored and definitely under chained in what you're doing.
So and you'd compensate for that with more thorough planning and the bit you're about to lead into probably with how you'd set the anchor before you go in. You just have to be very sure it's in.
It doesn't matter if you go onto a rope.
Yep.
Because these new modern windlasses still pull the rope through.
Yep.
It's just a matter of getting the splice through that sometimes a bit of
Yeah.
So what we do, we sit around, we get it all set up, everything's fine. I've then worked out where I want to go, and where I want to go is making sure I'm going to get my anchor. Now I'm a bit overcautious in this.
Yep.
There's nothing worse than when you've got two lines ashore, you haven't got enough anchor chain out, and then the wind comes in overnight and you start to drag.
Yep.
You're in no man's land.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. So it's very important to make sure your anchor is inland and strong and not tangled with someone else's.
Yeah.
So I then, before I even back in, I'm looking ashore to see whether I'm going to use a tree to put my line around, or a rock, or is there anything suitable.
Yep.
I take plenty of time in making sure everything's right.
And that's all happening out here.
That's all happening out there before I've even dropped my anchor.
There's no anchor down. We're just hanging out, checking it out.
And if it's a strong crosswind, if this is strong crosswind, I know I have to get into my dinghy fairly quickly. So I often have the dinghy ready, outboard down, motor going on it.
Yep. Where would you put the dinghy? On the side of the boat?
Yeah, just on the side.
Just so you don't reverse over.
I do make sure it's on the side. I have it so.
The short
in this
midship.
case, it's actually on the leeward side, so I know that I can get into it quite easily.
So it'd be kind of just for the
down there. But it's got to be easy so I can get into it, pull it round, or whatever. I tend to get my anchor out beyond theirs.
Yep.
So it's less chance of being a nuisance.
Yep.
And then I drop it. I've got the boat pointing in the right direction, so when I'm going to do this here, obviously the boat drops. I come round, I'm getting there. Before I even get to this position, the depth sounder is showing me we've got 15 metres in here. I've got I get 10 metres of chain down, anchor down on my meter. And then when I'm in my spot, before I even start going back properly, I'm letting the rest down.
Okay.
I like getting my anchor on the bottom. If I ever see boats coming in, they say, I want to drop my anchor here. He puts it in reverse flat out and tells his wife to drop the anchor.
Yep.
And so by the time he gets to here, the anchor finally hits the bottom.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have enough out.
So you're so we're assuming, for example, here that we've got a 15 metre depth. So the concept put 10 metres down about here. So there's only a little bit more needs to go out, and then the anchor's already on the bed.
And again, this is all preparation.
Yep, and communication.
Yeah, and communication, and getting it down. So on our boat, we could do it from the cockpit, and I'm controlling it from the cockpit. I then get it down. As I start to come back, I get it down going quite slowly.
What's the goal for the perfect scenario of where your anchor is?
Well, in this case, because the wind's blowing that way, and I know the wind's going to blow that way at night, I tried to have it slightly to weather of where I want to be.
So maybe here?
Yeah, maybe there,
Okay.
Maybe not as far as that, but I'd rather be a bit further to weather than to leeward. And then I'm back. So I'm going quite slowly, paying it out. So when I've got it down 15 metres, I probably don't really get the boat moving until I'm showing 20 metres.
Yeah, you're okay.
20 metres on the chain.
20 metres.
I'm not piling it on top of each other.
You're just
but I'm
slowly stretching it out. So
and
it
then-
might be about there by
Then
now.
I get going, and as you get to about where these anchors are here, you actually start feeling it pull.
Mm-hmm.
Now the great thing about knowing it's in, one, you know it's in, and the second thing is then you can use that to help you position your boat.
Yep.
Because you've always got tension on your chain. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people get their boats going and then stop because he's forgotten to tell his wife to let more chain out.
Yep.
And should
And
keep
so
letting the chain out. And
So your scenario, you might get there and then suddenly he's still motoring and the boat's not going.
well, no, I would do that. But what he does, he feels the chain pull up in a hurry,
Yep.
and so he takes it out of gear.
Yeah,
Rather than
right.
so once you stop a boat going in reverse, as you know, it's very hard
Yeah.
to get them going in a direction again.
Yep.
You've got to keep momentum on the whole way. So you just keep it going, you make sure plenty of chains. It doesn't matter if you let out too much chain,
Because you can always shorten it up
because
again.
you can always shorten it up. But it's dreadful not letting out enough chain.
Perfect.
And I get right back in here,
Yep.
as far back as I can. I'm a bit reckless. I go closer than my wife
Yep.
would like, because I don't want to be going too far ashore
Yep.
to get the rock.
Yep. Yeah, perfect.
So the other trick I've learned, if you actually keep pressure on the chain and keeping the boat in reverse but going nowhere, because by this time you've stopped letting out chain,
Yeah.
it actually positions the boat. I put my wheel hard over, so it's directing the water flow across the rudder,
Yep.
and it's just holding me up.
Nice.
And it may drift down slightly. That doesn't matter because you've got these boats here with fenders and you hope he's anked.
Yeah,
anchored
and
well
you've got
enough.
your fenders and so
So
on.
then I get in the dinghy with
Yep.
the heavier of the two floating lines
On the wind
on the windward side, around my rock, around my tree. Now here's the thing I do, and again this is from experience. Most people when they do these things, you do a bowline because that's what we're taught to do.
Yep.
Now what I found from this, by doing a bowline, if it's under pressure and you're trying to get out of there, you can't undo a bowline under pressure.
Yep.
So your wife has to let the line off while you're doing this, and I'm assuming that the wife's still on the boat. And then she lets it off, the boat springs forward on your anchor, so there's always tension on it. And then there's a communication problem.
Yeah.
So I've just learned to do what I call a rolling hitch,
Yep.
or a trucker's knot, which is just basically a half hitch. And you roll it round twice inside, like that, and then outside,
Do you want me to keep pressure there for you?
and then outside. Am I doing it the right way?
Yeah.
And then there, that's it, there. Oops. That's it there.
And what's good about that? Why do you like
Well,
that?
then it doesn't slip, because
Yep.
that's what the rolling hitch does. But when that's under pressure, you can actually undo this quite easily
Okay, cool.
and let it go.
And thanks for that, mate. And then so let's lead into just the last bit as a bit of an exit strategy. So we talked, and anyone that spent any time in the Med has got some stories of excitement for leaving. Someone's going their own boat or a charter boat. They've got in. What should they now be thinking about in terms of escape and exits?
Well, we've got both lines on now.
Yep.
And we're all settled down. Then the last thing we do is actually take the boat out of gear.
Yep.
And we have it all settled there, everything is right. We then look at how can we get out of here. Before I do anything else, I look at how I can get out of there in a hurry. Mm-hmm. There are times, it's not necessary to grab your ropes when you go. There are times when you have to get out in a hurry, and it happened to us twice this last season,
Yep.
where this boat here dragged onto this boat,
Yep.
and this boat couldn't go anywhere. So I got out, so this boat could get down, this boat could get out. And I just let my lines go.
Your stern
Yeah,
lines.
so when I've got my stern lines there, I have them paid out on the deck, so I can just take off without even worrying about letting them out.
Brilliant.
And then I would actually, in this situation, come out, sit here on my anchor,
Yeah.
and then go back in the dinghy and get them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you have to be prepared for that.
And would you even worry about trying to wind in the anchor on the windlass while you were coming out of here?
Not necessarily so. It's not that important. I may take up a bit of the slack so I don't drop down and hook my chain around him.
Yep.
But generally speaking, it's not the priority.
Yeah, yeah.
Priority is getting out of here cleanly.
Yep.
And once you're out, then you can start picking up those bits and pieces.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, I mean, the Med is it's not too bad, but it's not the easiest place to get to from Australia. Would you recommend people sitting on the fence about spending some time there, that they should definitely make sure they go and do a trip like this, even as a...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you do any of these things, plan it and make it a nice experience.
Yep.
It's great. The other thing I didn't mention is if you do make a mistake doing this,
Yep.
don't hesitate to bail out and have another go.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Well, I think we'll do some more of these with you in the future, but thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you.
That was
Pleasure.
awesome.
Thank you.